slave. He was an indentured servant. He worked in Virginia on a tobacco farm, and his master allowed him to use his own plot of land, so he perfected his skills on that plot of land for 15 years on that plantation, and during that time he married. He had 4 children. After all of those years, Antonio finally negotiated and bought his own freedom. So he gave money to this man, and he bought his own freedom. And that's when he decided that he was going to become an owner. He changed his name to Anthony Johnson, and in 1640, Anthony and his wife bought a plot of land and hired, not slaves, because there weren't slaves yet, he hired indentured servants. Got it? Now, that same year, in another place, there was another guy. Anthony was... While Anthony was doing all these things, there was a court case involving 3 indentured servants who had escaped. There were 3. And there's 2 white guys and a black guy. Got it? This is different than Anthony, who is over here. Now, these guys ran away. They escaped. They were caught. Well, 2 of them had their servitude extended by 4 years, and the third one had it extended for life. Can you guess which one got life? Which means you no longer can buy your freedom, so you in effect become a slave. It was this one. Are you asking the same question I asked? Why did these guys only get 4 years and this guy get life? Oldest story of time. This was the beginning of slavery. He was black. This is the beginning of the real nightmare that took a long time to get out. Now, back here, these guys are over here. Here's Anthony again. He's got his indentured servant. Well, Anthony's slave was John Castor. John Castor, who was also black, complained to a court that Anthony had unfairly extended his terms of servitude. The court emancipated Castor and said, "You're a free man, you can go." But Anthony went back and he tried to convince a court that Castor belonged to him and should be his for life. He won the court case, believe it or not. He won the court case and he became a slave. Do we have it? He became a slave. The first one. I tell you this story to show you that it's a human problem. It doesn't matter. It's not a white condition or a black condition. It's a human condition. Man will enslave any man when he can. This is a warning sign. It has happened throughout history. It's one of the layers of cake. Wait a minute. Everyone can do it. Do you know where the word slave came from? It actually came from the word Slav. Slav. The Slavic people in Central Europe. They were enslaved during the Middle Ages. Every time they'd lose a war, everybody would round them up and enslave them. Slav. Slavery. It didn't become race until much, much later. Now, this is horrible, but it's about to really go off the tracks. How did we go even more wrong than we already are? You always have to come back to the formula. Watch for this formula. When they collude, you're in trouble. Commerce, religion, government, and science. Got to go to tobacco. Tobacco, worth a lot of money. It was a skill set that the English were familiar with, but they weren't good at it at all. The people who were good at it were the indentured servants. They spent their whole time doing it, and they had a chance to buy their way out if they could do it well. Yet the colonies depended on this, depended on it. Just like they tell us now we're dependent on illegal immigrants. I mean, if they can make your tobacco cheaper or your salad cheaper, believe me, there will always be somebody that will take advantage of it. So, At the time, the colonies were struggling economically, so the pressure started to mount to produce more tobacco and more tobacco, more tobacco. There's a crisis. Sound familiar? At the same time, the colonies argued that freeing the indentured servants was causing a problem. It was a threat to property owners. They said that it was too costly. They couldn't keep up. These guys would leave, and then commerce would be hurt because there was so much turnover, and they had to spend too much money, which made tobacco more expensive, which hurt the economy. So restrictions started being placed. Because commerce was hurt, government stepped in, put more restrictions on. They placed restrictions on owning land. Well, that caused the indentured servants to become upset because, wait a minute, that's our way out. Well, these guys started taking to the streets and setting fires. Of course, instead of this moving the colonies to reject the horrific nature of servitude and move towards freedom, because people's dollars were at stake, they went the other way. You know what's strange here is I think this is actually our first Tea Party. The master was taking too much from the everyday people. It's the first time we saw the attitude of manifest destiny as well. That they could do anything. They can take the land from the servants. In 1662, Virginia took one of the last steps on the road to true evil. They enacted a law that said all children born into the colony to a slave mother would be enslaved. So now, not only were you a slave for the rest of your life, but now that slave passed it on from generation to generation, all based on color. By the way, let's go back here to Anthony Johnson. How did it end for Anthony Johnson? The freed, not slave, but the freed indentured servant who then was an owner of another black man. He died in 1670. This is the record of it. This is about his land. What happened to his land? Jury had to decide it. The land Johnson left behind, they decided, could be seized by the government. Could be seized by the government because he was, quote, by consequence, an alien. That's why all men are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Because this guy used the government to give him the right to own another person. Why? Because it was good for the government. They needed money. It was good for commerce. They needed money. So the government granted him a right because it was good for the collective. A government can give and a government can take away. The first servitude, then an extended punishment, then a crisis, then people born into slavery. Bit by bit, law by law, we progressed from horrible system of indentured servitude based on religion to an even worse one based solely on color. A little tweak here, a little tweak there, a nudge here, a nudge there. During a crisis, each time that nudge takes us down a little farther the road. That's why you must stop and ask yourself, not just what kind of change are we talking about, but what lies at the end of the road. If we just keep being nudged, where does it lead us? All of this evolved into the monstrous system of slavery that we're all familiar with from our history books. An entire race of people brutally enslaved by slave owners, empowered by the government. It is today this nation's deepest scar. A lot of our problems started here. It's our most grotesque national tragedy. But again, this is just scratching the surface. Do your own digging. Get the full history. You need to find out what you truly believe in, what this country is really about. Are we just about slavery? Is this the scar? The commerce, the government, the science, the crisis of tobacco dragged us deeper and deeper into slavery. But here's the part you also have to learn. What began to drag us out? That's next. All right, tonight we're trying to show you just some of the layers of this cake. Oh, the cake boss. I love you. I watch your show all the time. Some of the layers of this cake that make up our history. If you can squeeze in, you see that it's